Tonight I'd kind of like to talk about how we leveraged high altitude balloons over the years to kind of rejuvenate, reactivate club members, clubs itself, and also bring in some new blood into the ham radio community. And so anyway, basically the talk is how to use high altitude balloons to connect college students, because I found them to be the best ones to pull into the cult, if you will. And see if I can figure this out. And this is going to be my opinion, but I think we've seen it over a number of years that we see ham club participation shrinking a little bit, if not a lot. I know some clubs have gone to not monthly meetings, but maybe every 3 months having a meeting. So let's talk about the demographics. We're all getting older. And if I remember right, career, family challenges went to the forefront, ham radio went to the back, and then a little bit later in our life, said, hey, let's get back into this ham radio, but lo and behold, things have changed a lot. And so there's been a little bit of culture shock on that. Some people maybe don't get back into it. Let's see, get this going here. Like I said, we're getting older, which I thought it would take longer to get older, but apparently it hasn't. We have technology changes, you know, from especially the SDR revolution. We're starting to see a lot of RFI challenges, especially on the VHF bands, the UH bands. We have spectrum that people want, and so they're going to encroach, and if not, try to take it away from us. Antenna restrictions. Salina has a tower limit height. And then the clubs seem to focus more on a social aspect. Nothing wrong with that, it's just that that's kind of how we've gravitated. And I'm going to talk tonight and kind of give another direction that a group can take as yourself. Although I look around here and I see a well-attended club meeting on a Wednesday night, very positive aspect are. But then if you look at the positive side, we have skills. You know, we have expertise. We got into this hobby because we enjoy doing things. We like to learn. We want to try new technology. We like to share. And we can commit time now that we're a little bit older. We have resources. If it's not so much a part or two, we have time, we have money. And we like to share, as I said. And we have the capability to send less than a 12-pound payload to the edge of space and retrieve it legally. And that's where we're going to talk about. By the way, that picture is thanks to Tanner, one of the former students at the university up at Salina, that was screen grabbed out of the video at around 100,000 feet. So now we want to stop the erosion of the club membership and become a little bit more active in the community. So what can we do? And that's where we want to kind of focus. The synergy, of course, is a word that's been batted around for a long time. We also need to look at projects. What can we do other than a field day or some other type of nationally sanctioned contest, let's say. Let's look at projects that we can do as a group. We need to increase the geographical area of the participation. That's why Tanner, myself, Ruby, we're here from Salina. We realize that we have to expand to encompass and embrace more people that want to do the same thing. We don't have that nucleus like we used to have years ago. So we've got to go out farther. Once again, a project or a common goal. Got to do it indoors, got to do it outdoors, a little bit of both. Tanner's going to talk later tonight about some outdoor things. And then this is the big thing. I mentioned this in Dayton when I gave a talk a couple years ago. We've got to go to where the interested people are. They won't come to us. And that usually means you got to go to the colleges, the schools, the organizations that say, hey, we can use your expertise. They're not going to think, oh, I could use ham radio in this project and come to you. It never happens in my case. So we're going to leverage this knowledge base, if you will, to find what I like to call them playmates. And this is where the HAB, or high altitude balloon, comes in. We fly under FAA rules part 101. We follow the rules. As I said, less than 12 pounds. Routinely, that package there is 3 pounds. We use that as a tracking device. And then we hang whatever experiments we want below that. And so I like to call it a poor man's space vehicle. And that's exactly what it is. We can get to the edge of space. Technically, maybe not where we'd like to say the real space starts, but routinely at 100,000 feet, 30,000 clicks, we've got 2% of the atmosphere. It's kind of a hostile environment and unique. I think the amateur record for height is 130-some thousand, 140,000. But for a hydrogen balloon and the types that we like to fly, routinely 100,000 feet are doable. So that opens up another area to experiment with, someplace that we don't get on the ground. We can pack electronics of all kinds in there, sensors especially, microprocessors. I did bring a microprocessor board that's easy to build and easy to program. And this is what starts pulling in the college kids. It starts pulling in the interested techies, if you will. They start seeing, oh, I can learn a little bit of coding. I can learn a little bit of wiring, and that's where our expertise comes in. We know how to do a project, we know how to wire, we know how to build. So now it's just a matter of putting it all together. And this is the attractive part of the high altitude balloon, other than the fact that it's cool that we can send something to the edge of space. Make it very simple, as that round canister right there is just simply an APRS transmitter. Put that together, make it an afternoon or a day or half a day, launch it in the morning, go retrieve it. You're driving in your vehicle, you're running APRS, looking at a moving map. It's kind of a little competition to see who can get to it first. And we've never lost one yet in 30-some flights. Yeah, I'll go with that. But also keep in mind, the ham radio is a tool. You're not gonna go get a college group or a college classroom, as in my case, and say, hey, you want to come be a ham, let alone understand the terminology. But if you work that in as a ham radio is a tool, and primarily APRS, but also RF data links, as we'll can talk later about using 900 megahertz, which is out of the ham bands where we're using it as a commercial downlink. Because we need high-speed data to bring our results of our experiments back in real time. So it all plays in. It's all something we can explain to a group of students as we get them hooked, and just treat it as a learning experience. So I got a couple proposals here. I know I went through this pretty quick, but just bear with me. SSOK stands for Sky Science Over Kansas. It's a group we started back in the late 80s. Dave Powers knows that when we kind of did that, everybody had a kind of a name that tried to incorporate balloons and sound kind of scientific, and we just started calling ourselves SSOK, Sky Science Over Kansas. So what Sky Science Over Kansas can do, our small group, is provide expertise. We can provide a launch vehicle. We can help provide regulators for the hydrogen. We can suggest buying this balloon or provide a balloon. We can provide parachutes. We can provide a lot of the stuff that will jumpstart a project. And that's what we'd like to do. And we're game for doing it, expanding our geographical base, driving down to Wichita and playing with you all here. The other thing I'd recommend is that the club here connect with Wichita State's aeronautical department. I think that would be a good match.
Dylan, stand up.
Oh, okay.
This is our token aeronautical engineering student. We only have one right now, but if we get another
Excellent.
one, we think we can pair
Okay.
them up and they'll start to reproduce.
All right. Well, as you can let your imagination run, what would you like to haul up to the edge of space and see what you can learn? Some people have hauled up airfoils. They've looked at the temperature grading, and what the other thing in this case study that I'll present here in a minute is how we measured atmospheric gases. And so you're a prime candidate for coming up with an idea. And then looking for special events. I mean, you're here at a library. Surely there's Wichita, a big town, got things going on. Make a balloon launch a part of that. You got something going on with the air event or something like that to really mess up the airspace. Launch a big balloon. But I think there's a lot of opportunities down here, and that's why I've encouraged Tanner and some other people that I've worked with to come down and take advantage of this larger expertise filled room here. And hopefully I kind of made that clear on how we can take a balloon and generate some interest. Can we come up with an experiment? Can we do something? It's fun? And treat it as a project, and it's something that'll pull the membership together. When I say treat it as a project, is that what we did, we would meet once a week. And we had non-hams in attendance as well as hams, part of the teaching cadre, or assisting with the students. Years ago, I went to the college and said, "Where's your physics club? Where's your computer club, kids?" And tried to do a sales job. Would you like to, send up a balloon or two? Didn't get too much response. Got a little bit. We did some simple flights, but we never really got the attention of the university or the students until I went to the physics professors and I said, "Who would you recommend, or who do you think would be the best students for our little project here?" And then they knew their students, and they said, so they picked out 12, and we had a retention of 11 for that. And these students then participated once, sometimes twice a week, and to get in on these projects to do this. Now is what this collaboration looked like 2 years ago with a group of students at Kansas Wesleyan University. We entered what was called the Global Balloon Challenge. It's a worldwide event that had some particulars, had 2 categories: best design, best education initiative, and we had to have our launch completed by the end of May. So it kind of really pushed us through the Christmas seasons, holidays, everything else, and to set a project for these students to do to compete. And one of the motivators that I used was, I said, where in the world, especially in Kansas, can you kids or you students get to compete against MIT, Princeton, Cornell, some of the big boys, and see what you got? And let's see how we do in this worldwide competition. So we put it together, and I'm just going to show you some photos. And this was taken from the flight about 99,000 feet. As you can tell, there's a little clue on what we're going to be measuring, and it's CO2 in there. So anyway, this is what we look like just before the balloon burst. Let's see. Kansas Wesleyan, We didn't use their bus, we used the one on the left, the gray bus, to retrieve the payload. And so here we're working in the physics lab. The primary goal was to take these students that have never done any practical work. They're great on theory. I know one or two are probably going to be doctoral candidates, but they never had a soldering iron, a fluke meter, maybe a hot melt glue gun, but nothing more than that. And we take them through the steps of building the electronics. One of the gentlemen on the left there is a local engineer that got involved. He said, that sounds like fun, I'll come out too. He has no real desire to become a ham radio operator, but he pitched in and gave his expertise. A couple other students in the background. We tried to give it tasks that we could break up, and you didn't have to hover over everybody. You gave them a chance. We gave them a big enough chance to fail, but yet kept it within reason that we'd have a successful flight. The one gentleman there really took to the programming. He's talking to a Raspberry Pi, and that Raspberry Pi is hooked to a very simple Geiger counter. We wanted to get background information as the balloon went up. The young lady there was a kind of a real joy to have in the class, very enthusiastic. And by the way, these are all physics, math, and computer majors, and they're learning how to, let's measure boxes, let's put this equipment in here. And that was her joy of using a Dremel tool to cut a round hole. So we start with small successes. One night, I brought in a bunch of bare circuit boards, a handful of new old stock resistors and parts, and we had soldering class. And this is the result of this. Now this, obviously he's got an extra hand in there too, but you know, he's making those connections. We didn't say, well, that's the power bus and we really need to make sure that we don't screw this up. We'll solder it. No, we just said, you don't want to screw this up in front of everybody. So, and it puts the pressure on, they do well. More fitment, more understanding, 2 physics professors. And there's what this payload looked like that we sent up back in April of 2018, a year ago. You can kind of look around in there. You'll see the main part hidden in the back was this canister. This canister is responsible for measuring CO2 gases. Measuring CO2 gas, I'll stop and go sideways here a minute, is kind of a tough proposition. The government does it by taking a flask that's evacuated, sucking in air or samples, closing it off, running it through their machinery to come up with it. I made a few phone calls, and although I couldn't get it donated, I got a greenhouse CO2 sensor. Close enough, you know. I think it could get us plus minus 30 parts per million on accuracy. Okay, the price was right, you know. It was inexpensive, and it would fit, and it had a chance of living in our environment if we treated it right. So that's what we went with. So we come up with the fact that saying, okay, let's take a look at the payload there. We can go back to it here in a minute. Let's design around that. So that's what we worked with. We took the students through the hand-holding steps of designing and using this. And then we ran into a problem. The spec sheet said that the air going into the sensor at a rate of about 500 milliliters per minute needs to be between 20 and 50 degrees C. That's a little tough to do when it's minus 40 out, and we go through that range, and then we got to come back through. So to keep within specs of the sensor, we had to come up with something to deliver 500 milliliters per minute and keep it within temperature bands. So we got a pump that would pump 100 or 500 milliliters per minute. But the problem became, and we asked the students, and one in particular, how much energy are we going to need to raise 500 milliliters of air get it between a delta of 20 to 50 degrees centigrade? And 30 minutes later, of them crunching on the calculator, come up and said, oh, we need about 80 some watt hours of energy. Well, that's a pretty big battery, and that would put us over weight limits. So we said, that's a deal breaker. We can't fly that much weight. How are you going to solve the problem? And so we left it up to them to come up with some ideas and just kind of got out of their way. How are you going to get that air warm? Let's take another trip through memory lane here. There's the payload. Right on top, you'll see that black pancake. That's just duct tape that happens to be holding a coil of 5/16 tubing. Here's the air sampling heater and chamber, and we'll get to how they solve the problem. The sensor, the CO2 sensor is on the left there. It goes into the one end of the chamber. So that's how we're going to heat it. Come up with a couple automotive lamps, common 1156 down at O'Reilly's Auto Parts. Put a MOSFET on there. A little bit of electronics. Threw an Arduino on there. Programmed the Arduino in the pulse width modulation method. Put a sensor inside the tube, and said in the software, keep us at 30 degrees C. And so you can see them sliding the heater module in there. But that still couldn't overcome minus 40 degrees C air coming into this thing. There's not enough energy in those two bulbs. Might get close, but then we'd drain the battery before we had meaningful data. And this is a test phase. And we're seeing the data on the laptop there. Let me back up here a little bit. So their solution was pretty ingenious, I thought. Well, let's just take, because we had talked about there's no convection cooling at altitude. There's just not enough air. So all the sun energy that's hitting this payload is not going to be cooled by air rushing over it when you don't have air, of course. So how do you get rid of this heat? Well, in their case, they said, let's take advantage of it. They coiled about 15, 20 feet of clear plastic tubing, put it on top of the payload, covered it in black duct tape. So now we have a heat transducer. Taking the solar energy, heating the air in that tube, that 500 milliliter air works its way around. It's preheated before it goes into the chamber, and it became very easy for those two automotive light bulbs to keep up and keep the air within range. And as the data will show at the end here, it worked well. So a lot of testing. Some of the people in the picture there are non-HAMs, local engineers, local interested people. And then this is on launch day. It becomes a student-ran affair, basically. We just provide guidance. Sergio is working with the balloon there. We got the sheet on the ground so the balloon isn't punctured. And this is typically the steps we go through. We've got a tank of hydrogen there. And there you see the balloon, you see the parachute, you'll see this canister, and then Sergio is holding the big box. The reason he's running is we had a slight breeze that day. The balloon was out there. If he would have let go of the box, it would have bounced across the ground before it came up. So he ran to get underneath the balloon when the balloon was directly overhead, he was matching the airspeed, let go of the payload, and went straight up. So that was a successful launch. And then 45, 50 miles away to the southwest, this was one of the vehicles of the chase crew. The other vehicle got to see it land, just going right over a farmer's house and at the end of his driveway. So the proof of what we did is right here. So you can see the bottom line, you can see the launch marker, and you can see how the temperature got down, what was coming in, inlet air temperature from an external heat exchanger. So that sun was essentially warming that air just above maybe 45, 50 degrees, just coming in, just from hitting on those tubing. So we had no problem. And you can see where it got really cold and comes up, it gets. By the way, what happens when it gets to altitude is the lack of air allows for a lot more heating, no cooling. Now here's the crown jewels, I guess you would say. When we launched with this uncalibrated greenhouse sensor, we were showing 450 parts per million CO2. I would say that's in the ballpark of what we're getting from the government right now. For a greenhouse gas sensor, not calibrated, not temperature compensated, and not pressure compensated, we were in the ballpark. We got it at peak altitude, we're showing about 17 parts per million. If we adjust for pressure, it probably went down to 15. And as you can see, we've got a real nice curve as it comes back. So what we did was we took this, and the students had to put this all together in their words. And Ruby is a professor there at the university in the literature English department, so everything was spelled correctly. And they put it together, and we submitted it, and the results were we took second place internationally. A team in Malaysia just had more participants, which was one of the metrics, more participation. And I think that's the reason they were selected for first place. But anyway, it really bonded the kids. It bonded all of us that worked with it. And now it's a reoccurring event. Okay, some graduate, some don't. When are we going to do the next one? What can we do again? What can we do differently? So we already have things on the books. So basically, this is a case study and easily duplicated. It doesn't have to be this complex out of the box to start with, but pull these students in, and you'll have members, people working weekly, and if that's really what we want to do as ham radio operators, share the knowledge, it's a great thing. I'll use Tanner for an example. Tanner was in the first class of about 9 years ago. Had 10 students in there. They all got their licenses. Some of them got their extra license, so they really took to it. And so think, physics students, no problem passing the exams. He's the only one that has stayed with it and become, a premier operator, especially when it comes to parks on the air and worldwide flora and fauna, which you'll talk about in a minute here. But so it's about a 10% yield rate. And I think if you could get that, if you get one new member out of a group of classrooms like that, then you're going to have somebody to build on, somebody to continue. And with like your job that's involved or schoolwork involved there, it gives you a vehicle to use some of the classroom theory to put it to the test, send it out in the real world. So, any questions?
Somewhat of a technical question.
Sure.
I noticed you said you used hydrogen.
Yes.
Two questions really, or two-part question. what's the relative cost between helium and hydrogen, and how much benefit do you get by using hydrogen instead of helium?
Okay.
As far as altitude or payload or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, helium is a gas that's kind of hard to get because we can't make it other than the great fusion generator 93 million miles away. So helium has really gotten expensive. It's that same size cylinder, I think that was a K or a T cylinder that we use there. It's going to be in excess of $250, goes to $300 for that tank. And hydrogen, we can get a tank of hydrogen for $75, same size, no problem. The benefit of hydrogen, you got 6% more lift for the given volume. So we actually use less hydrogen than we do helium. The original thoughts on hydrogen were dangerous, you know, and it can be, but mostly what we tell the students and anybody filling with hydrogen, you stay low, the fireball goes up. If it does, so you're underneath, the fireball automatically goes up, and to this day I haven't really seen anybody get hurt, or we've never had ignition on that. So, but yeah, big cost difference, more lift for hydrogen. Yeah, Bob.
Your data is being recorded locally on board, or is it being transmitted at the same time for both high altitude CO2 information?
This was done on board with a data logger.
You couldn't get it till you gathered the payload.
Right, so we had to download it out of our little module in there too. We have started experimenting with doing real time with a 900 megahertz data link using some equipment for that. We're having teething problems on that. On our first launch, we had a hard time knowing where the payload was to keep the Yagi antenna on track, so we had, you know, a signal that would decode, and that was positional information. We didn't have good position information to rotate the antenna and steer it in the azimuth and elevation. So we're still trying. We'd still like to get it in real time, and because then it makes the payload a little bit simpler.
You said you're using APRS for tracking?
Yes.
After it hits the ground, or while it's in the air?
During in the air. So we will do like a -11, I think it is, on the APRS for the suffix, and that denotes a balloon. And so you're sitting there. Most of the students just pull out their smartphone, pull up APRS.fi, and you know, keep track of it right there. For a backup, we track with 2 meters and an antenna running through a TNC into a laptop. So we don't rely on the website to give us that data. We're getting it directly off the balloon package. And that's the primary job of that canister there, is to do that. And it'll run several days after it hits the ground.
But for a plus for, APRS.fi was almost identical to what the computer, you know, we were sitting with the computer and the phone, and they were almost identical.
Yeah.
Other than one was in meters and one was in feet, which took us some time to figure out.
Right. Yeah.
Once that was figured out, it's all good.
Yeah. Yeah. Tanner was a physics student there, so anyway. But yeah, that's what we use for tracking, and it's, in the olden days, it was just DFing, you know.
I was just curious, where's the most unusual place you found one?
For us, yeah. Landed on a military base, yeah. And we thought we really had a problem. It was down in southwest Missouri. And went up the front gate, and it looked like 4 college students, you know, that, you know, we lost our balloon out there someplace, and they let us in, and we found it hanging in a tree. That was probably the, you know, the most, but for most part, it's just remote areas, you know. Rarely does a person get to see it land unless they're really good on their tracking and have a pretty good idea how to stay ahead of it. So, anyway,
FAA clearance, window, timing for launch?
since we're under 12 pounds, no. You know, pretty, in 2 packages. They like to see 6 pounds, 6 pounds, you know, so you're reducing the mass, so if something runs into it, like your Cessna or whatever, it's likely not to quite bring them down. But, you know, if you stay underneath that, you know, we like to make sure that we're clear of clouds, and you know, we've launched at night with strobe beacons on it, you know. But if you go over the 12 pounds, now we're in a whole new ball game. We're starting to look at transponders, file a flight plan, get clearance to release, you know, things like that. It kind of cramps the style a little bit. And we figure, you know, if you can't build it within under 12 pounds, then you're probably hauling up too much stuff to start with. Yes, sir.
Do you have any association with amateur rocket groups?
No, I have not. Watched them, you know, but they're using some of the same technology, you know, especially on the cameras, pressure readings. But no, I saw this come out in the late 80s, and I thought, you know, I'll never get to space, but this is a way that by proxy, I could get to the edge of space. So I started building balloon stuff. And, but anyway, it's a great intro to electronics, ham radio, connecting college students, working within the community. It's been nothing but a win-win situation for us. Anyway, we'll be around. Go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about what Bill's done with pico balloons and maybe how it's a little easier to get those into grade schools?
Yeah, the father of amateur ballooning, Bill Brown, has designed a little circuit board with a solar panel on it, not much bigger, weighs a few ounces. They use about a 30-inch party balloon. They figured out how to inflate that so it just has the right amount of lift to lift a penny. And that's all they need to lift this device. This then party balloon is released, you know, students, grade schoolers, whatever, and it's a pre-manufactured board, and this thing goes up, and it gets caught in the jet stream, and it'll circumnavigate the globe. And I don't know what the record is, 16, 20 times, 6 times, okay. Yeah, and, you know, going around the globe.
40,000 foot.
Yeah, it just hangs out in the jet stream. And some interesting things go on there. They use I think the Whisper network in CW to send down some data. And then they've got it figured out so the kids in the classroom, especially the grade schoolers, can pull up a website and see it's over the UK now, it's over, you know, Germany or wherever it is, and kind of track it for a geography lesson. But the interesting thing that happens on this is, you know, oh great, you know, we can do that. But there's a couple countries that have no flight rules. Great Britain and North Korea is one of them. So what Bill has done is he wrote what he calls geo fences in. So as the GPS data comes into his little device, he's constantly calculating where the border of North Korea is 30,000 feet down. And when he approaches it, he shuts off the transmitter. And then it drifts on over across the border and it wakes back up. So anyway, you know, still legal. You know, leave it to the hams to come up with a way to do that. But anyway, thanks a lot. And I'll be around. We'll talk some more about this and show you some gizmos.
See you, little guy.